Well, well, well. It is an exciting time because, as we know, several days ago, a very crazy thing happened in the world of Metroid, and specifically in the world of Metroid Prime 4. Retro Studios on Twitter, the official Retro Studios Twitter account, updated their banner to this weird, random, mysterious, but awesome-looking picture of Samus. This is obviously huge news, and it sent ripples through the gaming community and ripples through the Metroid community, and everyone has been talking about this. Now, before I start diving deep in my kind of own solo video approach to breaking down and discussing this picture, I do want to talk about a couple of quick things. First and foremost, at this point, it's been a couple of days, and most people have already discussed this a lot, shared their opinions and their theories and predictions. Many people have made their own individual breakdown videos, so most people have already discussed in depth some of the aspects of this photo and the ideas it might be giving us about where Metroid Prime 4 might be going. And in fact, if you follow me, you would know that the morning after this photo was posted, I actually uploaded an hour-long podcast discussion with myself, Super Metal Dave, and Andre's Restart, where again, we spent a full hour nerding out about what this picture might be telling us about the game. And so that's really just a way for me to say, between other people and myself and my own hour-long podcast, we've pretty much discussed all of the things that we're going to potentially discuss in this video. So this video might be a retread of a lot of things you've heard other people say, or myself and Dave and Andre say on our podcast, whatever the case. But you know, our podcast was a very long video. A lot of people might not have watched it or chosen to avoid it or only seen parts of it. And so I felt it would be good for me to make my own truncated sort of shorter video, giving my own solo opinions on what this may mean. Also, it's worth noting that maybe this photo means nothing at all for Metroid Prime 4, and I know that, but I think it's more fun to explore what this might actually be telling us about the game, because if I'm being honest with you guys, there's no doubt in my mind that this photo is a real tease of Metroid Prime 4, which makes it a crazy big deal. And so, yeah, I want to go ahead and jump into looking at this photo with you guys and discussing my own thoughts about what it might say about this game. Of course, before we dive any deeper into this Metroid Prime 4 discussion, I like to remind you guys I'm always trying to grow the channel here on Rule of Two Review. I am closing in on 20,000 subscribers, and I am so excited to potentially hit that milestone this year in 2022. I upload every single week. I talk about all things Nintendo. I talk about everything Metroid possible, and I discuss all things gaming. So as you watch this video, if you seem to like what I'm doing and what you hear, then I hope you will consider subscribing to the channel. So let's dive into this photo. And again, we have to remember that this photo, the way it was announced, just a random changing of a banner on Twitter, as insignificant as that may seem, is actually a big deal. And to me, it feels very significant. The fact that they actually didn't make a press release or an announcement or a tweet that said, "Isn't Samus great? Here's this cool art of Samus." To me, the context behind it being quietly updated from Retro Studios of all companies, and everything that we know has happened with Retro since Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze in 2014, and with Metroid Prime 4 since its announcement, and then its restart and delay and moving to Retro, and the whole context behind this photo existing and everything behind it, to me makes it a significant deal. And as far as I'm concerned, this is the first official look and tease of Metroid Prime 4 since it was announced almost 5 years ago. Really stop and think about that. And so again, if you watched our podcast, you've heard a lot about what I'm going to say, but I'm going to repeat a lot of it, and I want to talk more in depth here. So first thing I want to talk about is when we zoom in and look at Samus herself, the first thing I take away from this is that without question, this is the Metroid Prime version of Samus, because that to me is absolutely the Metroid Prime version of her Varia suit. It's all about the pose, and it's all about those shoulder pads, you guys. That is the Metroid Prime version of her shoulder pads. And it's not the dark suit like some people said, just because they look really big, like the dark suits are very big. It's just a regular version of that Varia suit from specifically Metroid Prime. We have to remind ourselves that, you know, her look, the art styles, the different versions of her suits and whatnot from every single game, 2D or 3D or whatever, they all look a little bit unique and different and distinct based on the game or if it's first person or 2D. or 3D, you know, third person like Other M. But when you look at specifically how the Metroid Prime art style is, that's what we're looking at. Even in silhouette form, I can tell without a shadow of a doubt that we are looking at that version. So again, we know this is Metroid Prime, and I just don't think this is hinting at a Prime trilogy or a Prime remake, because as exciting as that is, I don't think you would need to tease it with this vague sort of picture. Also, the area she's standing in does not look like anything from any of the 3 games. So to me, it's Metroid Prime 4, plain and simple. The other thing that we look at here is, of course, the location that she's standing in. And it's worth noting that, and I pointed this out on the podcast, to me, it looks a little bit kind of like a runway, if that makes sense. If you imagine like a tunnel that a ship, a small like one-person ship, something like Samus's gunship, for example, could almost travel in and out of to like leave or exit a planet or a larger spaceship, or like an alien location or something, you know, to leave or to enter through this is kind of like a runway or a pathway. Other people have also pointed out something that I myself did not initially notice, and so I'll give credit to the internet for pointing this out, and that is the lights above her and kind of traveling back behind her. It almost could look like, and I don't know that I believe this, but I thought it was interesting, so I want to discuss it with you guys and point it out. It almost looks like the lights above her are almost for like a shaft that would allow for one person to enter and exit a ship above them, right? Think of the way she enters and exits the ship in Metroid Prime 3, for example, where the little shaft comes down and she walks into it and it brings her up into her ship. And so you could maybe argue that, you know, it's so many things are out of focus and dark in this picture that those lights almost could be around like an entranceway or a doorway above you that you would enter and exit from that sort of little, you know, door, and like a shaft comes down and brings you in and out of the ship. So I don't know if there's anything to that, and I don't know that I exactly believe it, but I can sort of like squint and see what people are pointing at, and the way the lights are positioned, maybe that's what that is. If you picture like being abducted by an alien craft, you know, like in stories about people being abducted by UFOs, and you look at those lights, I can see what people are saying. So maybe her gunship or a different ship is above her, but I truly don't think that's what it is. I just wanted to point it out because it's kind of interesting. Trying to zoom way in the background, there's very little detail we can make out. I was hoping to see something that might look like familiar architecture or a familiar specific structure, or like a door that we've seen in the Metroid Prime games before. But as far as I can tell, I don't really see anything. Maybe you or someone else has been able to identify something here, but it's really hard. I don't actually see anything back here. You can see the vaguest hints of some kind of structure, and obviously this pathway or walkway or liquid channel that she seems to be standing in does seem to travel very far into the distance, but at some point it kind of just becomes a mess of nothing, and I don't know. I just don't see anything back there. So really, as far as the location she's in, it's nothing we've seen from prior Metroid games, and specifically the Prime games, 1, 2, and 3. And whether it's like an organic alien ship or a space station or a planet or underground, or if there's some kind of ship or her gunship above her, tough to say. She's definitely standing in a walkway, or as Andres pointed out, like maybe like a sewage channel and maybe some liquid goes there. I have long discussed that I think Metroid Prime 4 will continue the story beats of the trilogy. It has to, because it's not Metroid Prime's spin-off name, it's Metroid Prime number 4. So things like Phazon and things like Metroid Prime, Dark Samus, all of those things, they have to continue in some way, shape, or form if it's number 4, a sequel to Metroid Prime 3. And so Phazon could exist, and so I like the idea of like liquid Phazon traveling across this channel, right? But at that point, we're really trying to force ourselves to figure out the story elements, and we just don't get really story elements from this photo. We just see Samus. Now, the next big thing we have to talk about has been a big topic of discussion, and that includes our podcast that we had a couple of days ago. And it's this shadow, man. To me, this shadow seems like it might be saying a whole lot about what's going on. And I'll admit, while I thought it was interesting to note, and it gave me initial echoes of like Metroid Prime 3's cover, where you have Samus and Dark Samus standing back to back, and the duality in both Metroid Primes 2 and 3 of like a positive force and a negative force, a Samus and a Dark Samus, a light and a dark. it seemed to echo that a little bit, but I didn't really focus too much on it initially because I was like, oh, it's just her shadow because there are lights above and behind her. But as we discussed on the podcast, and as I've had a couple of days to also sit with this photo and analyze it further, I thought about our discussions, and I was like, I think there's something to this. Both Dave and Andres on our podcast brought up some ideas about the shape and the positioning and the fact that it doesn't seem to match Samus's pose, and I think that's correct. And then Andres, full credit to him, mentioned that maybe this shadow isn't representing Dark Samus, and maybe it's not supposed to be Samus, but it does kind of look like Psylocke. And I was like, I think that there might actually be something to that. And now that I've sat on it for a couple of days, I really think there's something to that. You can see that the positioning of the arms doesn't seem to match Samus's positioning, that's for sure. And then you look at the fact that, that really, the arm cannon side, the left side, it looks more like Psylocke than it does Samus and her arm cannon. I really think that that's true. And here's the thing. I think most of us, and this includes me, have always thought Psylocke will play a role in this game because he was teased at the end of Metroid Prime 3. So there's no reason to think Psylocke won't be involved in some way, shape, or form in this game. And Dark Samus, I don't think is a part of this game because Dark Samus was only created after the initial Metroid Prime entity was destroyed, and Samus's energy was mixed with Metroid Prime and the Phazon energy, and that created a dark version of Samus that played a huge role in Primes 2 and 3. Dark Samus does not come along with a Metroid Prime entity by default. So I think a new Metroid Prime is very likely going to be created and an enemy in Prime 4, but that doesn't mean Dark Samus is going to come along just because. Dark Samus was created out of chance and happenstance, not just because Metroid Prime existed. And so there's no reason to think Dark Samus will play a role in this game, as much as I want it, because I love Dark Samus, and maybe Retro Studios tells a tale that brings her back into the fold, but I just don't think it's going to happen. I don't really think Dark Samus is coming. Psylocke, however, probably is. And so this might just be a trick, and it's just a shadow and we're overthinking it, but it also might be a tease that Psylocke is a part of this role in this game, and that he represents the alternative force to Samus. And now the last main thing I want to talk about is something that I myself noticed and brought up in our podcast, and initially I didn't see people talking about it until a day or two after this photo, and after I had talked about it on our podcast. And it's that when you zoom out and look at this picture as a whole, if you look at the kind of blurry triangular shapes to the left and right of Samus that appear to be, the lit kind of channel that she's standing in, but in the foreground, I don't know if that's actually part of the structure she's in or not, but what they do look like is kind of the reflection of eyes, of like an evil eye, as if you're maybe looking through a visor staring at Samus down the end of this channel, right? And even the border of this image kind of looks like a visor HUD that we've seen in the Metroid Prime games. And so it could either be, the foreground of the structure, but they maybe designed it in such a way to just insinuate thematically the idea of eyes, or maybe they're just straight up eyes being reflected in a visor. Or maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just the structure she's in and they're not eyes and we're just seeing it that way, and maybe it's just tricking me. But I kind of think that they are eyes. The more I've looked at it over the weekend, I'm like, yeah, man, these seem like they're eyes. Now, once more people started to talk about the fact that maybe these are eyes and that this is the HUD of a visor, a lot of folks start talking about Dark Samus again. And it's like, I get it, you guys, and there's always a chance that they make it happen, but I don't think that's the case, because these eyes don't match anything we've seen of Dark Samus. When you see Dark Samus with her helmet on, the visor and the front of her face and helmet do not match these two individual separated eyes. And then on top of that, when we look at Dark Samus at the end of Metroid Prime 2, where she isn't really wearing her suit and her armor, and she's like an exposed version of herself that you have to fight at the end of that game, she's almost like a skull, like a Phazon, weird, mysterious, ethereal skull face. And her two separated eyes in that form also don't look like this. Again, the power is in the writer's hands, so the writers could find a way to still make this be a version of Dark Samus if they want. It's not impossible. But as far as I'm concerned, the two versions of Dark Samus we've ever seen, both with the helmet and without the helmet, don't match these eyes. To my knowledge, we've never seen Psylux without his helmet, so we don't even know if these match his eyes. So maybe this is telling us that it's Psylux, or more exciting to me would be if these are eyes and they're instead hinting at a new foe, a new enemy, some other force that is going to be combating or posing some sort of threat to Samus. You know, every Metroid game should hopefully bring across new elements and new enemies and new characters, just like Metroid Dread brought along Ravenbeak and Quiet Robe. So this is probably Psylux, if these are even eyes in the first place, but there's a chance it's another new foe, maybe even the main foe that would be the final boss after you would defeat Psylux. And so there's a lot of possibilities here. Granted, one of those possibilities is that these aren't eyes and it's just tricking us and it's tricking me. But the other possibilities is that this is Psylux or this is a new foe. And either one of them make me incredibly excited. And so here's the thing, you guys. At the end of the day, if we take a step back and look at this whole situation as a whole, just like I said in the beginning, man, this is undoubtedly, in my mind, an actual legitimate tease for Metroid Prime 4. Not just Metroid in general, not Metroid Prime Remake or Trilogy HD Remaster. It's Prime 4, man. There's just no doubt in my mind. And that is massive, mammoth, epic news when you really stop and think about it. Take a second, if you haven't let that sit in for a minute. Consider the context of the situation, the fact that we never thought we would get a Metroid Prime 4 in the first place, the fact that it was announced 5 years ago with just a logo, the fact that it was silent until in 2019 they told us it fell apart behind the scenes, we're canceling that version, we're giving it back to Retro Studios, the original developer, we're restarting the game, and we'll talk to you soon. And then it's been another 3 years, 5 in total almost, and the game has been completely silent, including Retro Studios, other than just job postings. And then suddenly on their Twitter account, with no pomp and circumstance, they just change their banner to this mysterious picture of Samus that we've never seen before, but that holds tons of clues. You know, this weird concept art or whatever it is that just has tons of clues. As far as I'm concerned, you guys, after 5 years of silence and waiting, we have something real. It is tangible. It is extremely vague. There's no doubt about it. It's extremely vague. And that might be frustrating to some people. It might mean some people are like, it just means nothing. You guys are grasping at straws. Stop finding excuses to be excited over just a dumb picture of Samus. Some people may feel those ways, but I don't feel that way. To me, it's real. It's suddenly like a real thing, you guys. We can start licking our lips at the fact that Metroid Prime 4 is becoming a real thing. And they chose this brilliant, subtle way to just hint and tease at the game to show us that the gears are finally turning behind the scenes. As far as I'm concerned, we're seeing this game in 2022. I thought we would see it last year, but we didn't, and that's okay. We got Metroid Dread instead, so hello, I was at least right on that part. And then, at the beginning of this year, I said this is the year we're going to see Metroid Prime 4, I'm sure of it. I don't think it's going to probably release this year, but are they going to finally acknowledge this game, show us a tease, show us a picture of Samus, maybe give us a trailer, give us a full title, give us a release window, maybe like a year or whatever their target is? I mean, something is coming, man. This is it, you guys. We are on the cusp of seeing this game. I just freaking know it. Finally, we have something real about Metroid Prime 4. And it's extra exciting after Metroid Dread came out just a couple of months ago. And so that just means we turn our sights to E3, man. You know, at this point, E3, it's only 4 months away. How can this not be the ideal time to actually show us and tell us something real about Metroid Prime 4 after just putting this photo up and letting everyone lose their minds over this picture? And I made a 1-hour podcast with some friends about it. Everyone's made videos and tweets about it. Now I'm making an additional 20-minute video talking about it, like just getting excited. E3's right around the corner, and like, I mean, maybe E3 isn't going to happen. I guess it's still up in the air with the pandemic and everything that the ESA has said about it. But whether E3 happens officially or not, I think bare minimum Nintendo is still going to give us a summer direct of some kind that's going to have that epic E3 feel to it. And that's going to be the time. I mean, they'll probably start to talk a lot about Zelda at E3. And at this point, it seems like Metroid, it's going to be the same. How can they not release this picture in February and then with E3 4 months later, talk more about the game? Show us a 30-second or a minute-long trailer. teaser. Give us a release year, say 2023 at the end, or whatever they're going to do. I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen. So, at this point, not much more to say for now, other than to just geek out and be excited. And I want to know what you guys think. You know, you've heard me theorize for 20 minutes in this video and kind of look at this picture and take some things away from it. I know we've all been doing the same thing, but now you've heard me do it separate from our podcast as well. What do you think about my theories? Do you agree with them? Do you disagree? What are your own theories and takeaway from this photo? How do you feel about Metroid Prime 4? Do you think it's coming this year or not? Whatever you think, talk about it below. And with that, this video is a wrap. So, of course, thanks as always for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of Two Review, and I will catch you next time on another video. Bye-bye.